Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The Jefferson County courtroom was silent, too silent. Even the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to amplify the palpable tension in the air. 17-year-old Elijah Carter sat in the dock, his back straight, his hands clasped in his lap. His large, dark eyes betrayed both fear and determination. Facing him, 38-year-old police officer Matthew Collins wore a cold, confident smile. His immaculate uniform and folded hands on the lectern gave the impression that he held the absolute truth. But behind this mask of confidence, a part of him knew that doubt could arise at any moment. What he hadn't anticipated was that the boy's defense would turn the courtroom against him. Sharon Carter, Elijah's mother, stood at the back, her face pale but her fists clenched. She knew her son's career and reputation were at stake. Every beat of her heart pounded in her chest like a silent war drum. Judge Harris, imperturbable in his black robes, observed attentively, his brows slightly furrowed. The scales of justice seemed fragile, ready to tip at the slightest misstep. Matthew Collins began his testimony, his deep voice filling the courtroom. He described the alleged robbery confidently, portraying Elijah as a dangerous young delinquent. Every word was calculated to influence the jury and intimidate the boy. But something about Elijah's posture betrayed a quiet strength. He wasn't trembling as much as one might expect, and his eyes shone with a silent determination. Then Vanessa Brooks, the defense attorney, stood up. She was known for her unflappable calm and her talent for uncovering the truth. Her piercing green eyes fixed on Matthew with an intensity that made the police officer pale slightly. Vanessa knew exactly how to dismantle the lie that was about to be exposed. She began asking simple, precise questions, gradually revealing inconsistencies in Matthew's story. The courtroom, which had been hanging on the police officer's every word, began to whisper, intrigued and shocked. Every word from Vanessa was a stone thrown into Matthew's facade of certainty. Elijah took a deep breath. For the first time since his arrest, he felt he had a real chance to prove his innocence. The tension in the room became almost unbearable, the silence oppressive. The policeman's lie was about to be exposed, and Elijah's world was about to change forever, for better or for worse. The afternoon sun beat down harshly on the parking lot in Jefferson's residential neighborhood. Elijah Carter had just stepped out of his supervised driving lesson, a notebook clutched to his chest, when a siren wailed behind him. Before he could process what was happening, a police car pulled up abruptly, and Officer Matthew Collins stepped out with menacing authority. "Elijah Carter?" Matthew asked in a firm, almost icy voice. Elijah raised his hands, surprised and confused. "Yes, sir." "What's going on?" "You are under arrest for vehicle theft," Matthew replied, a cold smile on his face. "You were filmed taking this car. You have the right to a lawyer." Elijah felt his heart clench. "But I didn't do anything. I never touched that car." Sharon Carter, who had just arrived in the parking lot after receiving a frantic call from the high school, saw her son in handcuffs. "Elijah," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. She rushed toward them, but Matthew pushed her away sharply. "Back off, ma'am. This is none of your business right now." Inside the police station, Elijah was placed in a cell. Each click of the handcuffs on the metal sounded like a condemnation. Sharon, distraught, tried to understand what had just happened. She knew her son was a responsible young man, never involved in anything illegal. When Vanessa Brooks arrived at the police station that evening, she immediately took the file. Her eyes scanned every detail, the police report, the witness statements, the surveillance videos. She quickly realized that Matthew Collins had built an accusation on flimsy, even fabricated, evidence. "We will prove his innocence," Vanessa told Sharon, her voice calm but resolute. "That police officer may have thought he could frame him, but he doesn't know my client." Elijah, sitting on the cell bench, felt a slight sense of relief. For the first time since his arrest, he had someone who believed in him and would fight for him. Yet, He knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. Matthew Collins wasn't going to give up easily, and the truth would have to fight to emerge. The next morning, Vanessa Brooks's office was bathed in the cold light of the September sun. Files were spread out on her desk, photos, reports, and hastily scribbled notes. Every detail could be used as a weapon to defend Elijah Carter. Vanessa thought back to her encounter with Elijah the day before. The young boy had that glint of determination in his eyes despite his obvious fear. She knew that Matthew Collins's lie wouldn't withstand a precise and methodical cross-examination. She began by reviewing the police reports. Some details seemed inconsistent: the exact time of the arrest, the description of the stolen vehicle, and even the statements of potential witnesses. A surveillance video appeared to show a teenager wearing a sweatshirt identical to Elijah's, but in a different location, at the same time. Vanessa frowned. Matthew Collins tried to construct a perfect story, she murmured, but he forgot that the truth always leaves traces. She immediately contacted Sharon Carter to arrange a meeting with her son. Elijah arrived, his face marked by fatigue and worry, but his gaze was sharp. "Elijah," Vanessa said calmly, "I believe in your innocence. But we must be methodical. I will examine every detail of this accusation and prepare you for court." Elijah nodded, his shoulders tense. "I didn't do anything, but everyone believes the policeman." Vanessa placed a hand on his shoulder. "It doesn't matter what people believe. We're going to show the truth. And believe me, in this courtroom, the truth has a power that even arrogant police officers cannot ignore." She then began to piece together the sequence of events, interviewing neighbors, reviewing security footage, and discovering that some witnesses had been intimidated into supporting Matthew's story. Each discovery strengthened her conviction: Elijah had been falsely accused, and this injustice was about to be exposed. As night fell on Jefferson, Vanessa gathered the evidence. Elijah, sitting beside her, felt hope rising. The battle ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since the arrest, he felt he had a real chance to prove his innocence. On the day of the trial, the Jefferson courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. The air was thick with murmurs and anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for the moment when the truth would come out. Elijah Carter entered, accompanied by his mother Sharon and Vanessa Brooks. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, each sound emphasizing the gravity of the situation. He felt eyes turning towards him, some sympathetic, others accusatory. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Matthew Collins, already standing behind the witness stand, was waiting for him. His expression was arrogant, almost mocking. He knew the entire room expected him to speak, and he was determined to capture their attention and portray Elijah as guilty. Judge Harris banged his gavel to call the court to order. "We are beginning the trial of young Elijah Carter for alleged vehicle theft. Officer Collins, you are called to testify." Matthew stepped forward, proudly straightening his uniform. He began to tell his side of the story, each word carefully chosen to sow doubt about Elijah's credibility. He described the robbery as a premeditated act, emphasizing the danger the young boy posed. Elijah felt a lump form in his throat. Matthew's gaze was cold, accusatory, and every word he spoke echoed through the room like a preemptive condemnation. Yet, when he looked at Vanessa, he felt a surge of courage. She was there, ready to stand up for the truth. Vanessa stood for cross-examination. Her voice was calm and measured, but carried a weight that sent a chill through the courtroom. "Officer Collins," she began, "can you confirm the exact time you claim to have seen my client take the vehicle?" The police officer replied, but a slight tremor in his voice betrayed his confidence. Vanessa continued to ask pointed questions, revealing contradictions in his account, inconsistent details about the scene, and the lack of reliable witnesses. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The public was beginning to perceive the weakness of the prosecution's case. Elijah, for the first time, felt that the scales of justice could tip in his favor. He understood that his defense wasn't just a formality, it was powerful, and the policeman's lie was beginning to crumble. By the end of the first day, the tension was palpable. Matthew Collins, usually so self-assured, seemed slightly shaken. Elijah, though weary, felt a newfound hope. The fight for the truth was only just beginning, but for the first time since his arrest, he knew he wasn't alone and that he had a real chance to prove his innocence. On the day of the trial, the Jefferson courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers filled every available seat. The air was thick with murmurs and anticipation, as if everyone was waiting for the moment when the truth would come out. Elijah Carter entered, accompanied by his mother Sharon and Vanessa Brooks. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, each sound emphasizing the gravity of the situation. He felt eyes turning towards him, some sympathetic, others accusatory. He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Matthew Collins, already standing behind the witness stand, was waiting for him. His expression was arrogant, almost mocking. He knew the entire room expected him to speak, and he was determined to capture their attention and portray Elijah as guilty. Judge Harris banged his gavel to call the court to order. We are beginning the trial of young Elijah Carter for alleged vehicle theft. Officer Collins, you are called to testify. Matthew stepped forward, proudly straightening his uniform. He began to tell his side of the story, each word carefully chosen to sow doubt about Elijah's credibility. He described the robbery as a premeditated act, emphasizing the danger the young boy posed. Elijah felt a lump form in his throat. Matthew's gaze was cold, accusatory, and every word he spoke echoed through the room like a preemptive condemnation. Yet, when he looked at Vanessa, he felt a surge of courage. She was there, ready to stand up for the truth. Vanessa stood for cross-examination. Her voice was calm and measured, but carried a weight that sent a chill through the courtroom. Officer Collins, she began, can you confirm the exact time you claim to have seen my client take the vehicle? The police officer replied, but a slight tremor in his voice betrayed his confidence. Vanessa continued to ask pointed questions, revealing contradictions in his account, inconsistent details about the scene, and the lack of reliable witnesses. The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. The public was beginning to perceive the weakness of the prosecution's case. Elijah, for the first time, felt that the scales of justice could tip in his favor. He understood that his defense wasn't just a formality, it was powerful, and the policeman's lie was beginning to crumble. By the end of the first day, the tension was palpable. Matthew Collins, usually so self-assured, seemed slightly shaken. Elijah, though weary, felt a newfound hope. The fight for the truth was only just beginning, but for the first time since his arrest, he knew he wasn't alone and that he had a real chance to prove his innocence. The following morning, the courtroom was even more crowded than on previous days. The atmosphere was electric, the public sensed that the outcome of the trial could change at any moment. Vanessa Brooks stood up, determined to bolster Elijah's credibility. Your Honor, I wish to call some witnesses to the stand. The first to testify was Mr. Harold Jenkins, a neighbor of Elijah. He had seen the young boy on the day of the alleged robbery, but not in the same place as the prosecution claimed. Where were you around 4:15 p.m. on September 12th? Vanessa asked. I was in my backyard, repairing my fence, Harold replied. And I saw Elijah walking on the opposite sidewalk, far from any suspicious cars. The jury murmured, and Matthew Collins frowned, unable to respond to this direct testimony. Next, Vanessa presented CCTV footage from a local store. The screen clearly showed a teenager wearing the same sweatshirt as Elijah, but several blocks away from where the robbery allegedly took place. This video proves that my client could not have been in two places at the same time, Vanessa said, her eyes fixed on the jury. The prosecution's case rests on assumptions and lies, not facts. Then Ms. Linda Thompson, a store employee, entered. I saw Elijah in our store at exactly that time, she confirmed. He was talking to a friend and never touched the car parked in front of the store. Each testimony added a new piece to the puzzle of Elijah's innocence. The public, the jury, and even some of the police officers present seemed to be beginning to understand that Matthew Collins's story was fragile. Sharon Carter, sitting at the back of the room, felt her hands tremble with emotion. For the first time since her son's arrest, she felt hope reborn. Elijah, for his part, breathed more freely, aware that his truth was beginning to come to light. Vanessa turned to Matthew, her gaze piercing. "Officer Collins, can you explain why your accusations are contradicted by concrete evidence and reliable witnesses?" Matthew hesitated. A slight tremor in his voice betrayed his confidence for the first time. Doubt was beginning to erode the image he had constructed from the start. The battle for truth was only just beginning, but Elijah was starting to feel that justice might finally be on his side. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak. The jury, hanging on every word, seemed to waver between disbelief and shock. Elijah Carter, sitting in the dock, felt his heart pounding, but this time it was with the excitement of a truth about to be revealed. Matthew Collins returned to the witness stand, his face tense and his arrogant smile gone. Vanessa Brooks, methodical and determined, resumed her cross-examination. Each question was like a scalpel, patiently cutting away the layers of lies the police officer had constructed. "Officer Collins," Vanessa said calmly but firmly, "can you explain why your report mentions a witness who claimed to have seen Elijah near the vehicle, when we now have 3 witnesses and a video that proves the opposite?" Matthew's face tightened. There must have been a mistake in the report." Vanessa continued relentlessly, "You also claimed that the vehicle was locked and the engine was still running when you arrived. Yet, the evidence shows that the car had been locked for hours and that no engine was running. How do you explain this contradiction?" Matthew wavered, his confidence crumbling. "Well, I may have been wrong about some details." The jury exchanged surprised glances. Vanessa's words were clear: the police officer had lied, or at least exaggerated his version of events. Every contradiction, every inconsistency eroded the prosecution's credibility. Elijah felt a wave of relief wash over him. The quiet strength he had maintained until now was beginning to transform into confidence. His defense wasn't just speaking for him, it was methodically exposing the truth and showing everyone that lies couldn't stand up to the evidence. Vanessa ended her cross-examination with a final question, which echoed throughout the room. "Officer Collins, do you still believe my client committed this crime, despite all the evidence and testimony that shows the contrary?" Silence fell. Matthew, unable to answer confidently, looked away. The courtroom was in shock. Even Judge Harris, usually impassive, frowned slightly. The police officer's lie had just been exposed, and the stark truth was finally prevailing. For Elijah and his family, it was a turning point. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, they could feel that justice was getting closer, and that Elijah's innocence was beginning to triumph. The courtroom seemed to vibrate with a new energy. The murmurs that had begun timidly during the previous testimonies had transformed into more insistent whispers, then into a general hum. The once passive public now watched Matthew Collins' every move with skepticism and disbelief. Journalists, notebooks in hand and cameras at the ready, noted every contradiction and hesitation of the police officer. The cameras broadcasting the trial live began to capture the changing atmosphere. Social media would soon erupt. Matthew's facade of authority had cracked. Matthew, usually imperturbable, felt the weight of all those eyes fixed on him. Every breath in the room seemed to remind him that his lie was no longer hidden. His face hardened, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his uniform. Vanessa Brooks observed the audience and knew the pressure was working in their favor. She turned to the judges, her gaze piercing, and spoke calmly but resolutely. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you see here is the truth emerging. Elijah Carter was never where the prosecution claims. The evidence, the witnesses, and even the videos speak for themselves. Don't be intimidated by the appearance of authority." The jury seemed captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the police officer, trying to understand the contradictions. Even some spectators, who had initially believed in Elijah's guilt, were now murmuring amongst themselves, shocked by the defense's methodical demonstration. Sharon Carter felt tears welling up in her eyes. She squeezed her son's hand, her heart pounding with emotion and pride. For the first time since this ordeal began, she felt that justice was not a distant dream, but a reality within reach. Matthew, for his part, began to grasp the magnitude of his situation. The public, the jury, and the media were now scrutinizing him like never before. He was no longer simply a police officer in the witness box, he had become the symbol of a lie exposed for all to see. Vanessa leaned slightly towards Elijah and whispered, "Stay calm. The truth is with us. And soon, everyone will see it." Elijah nodded, his breath lighter than it had been since his arrest. The battle wasn't over yet, but the shockwaves from the defense were beginning to take hold, and Matthew Collins would have to face the consequences of his lies. The murmur in the courtroom intensified as Sharon Carter, Elijah's mother, rose tentatively but resolutely. She had waited for the precise moment to speak, aware that her voice could add decisive emotional weight to the defense. Judge Harris stared at her with a mixture of surprise and authority. "Ms. Carter, do you wish to speak?" he asked. Sharon took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, when it rose, was firm and clear. "I am Elijah Carter's mother," she began. "From day one, I have seen my son face an accusation he never deserved. My son is honest, respectful, and would never hurt anyone. What you hear from the prosecution, these are not facts, they are lies." The room fell silent. Every word seemed to resonate in the air, striking directly at the hearts of the jurors and the public. The journalists, usually in a hurry to capture sensational images, now noted each sentence with respect and attention. Sharon continued, her eyes shining with determination. "Elijah is a bright boy, a model student. We are not here to manipulate your opinion, we are here to see justice done. And I ask you not to be misled by those who use their position to intimidate an innocent young man." The silence that followed was almost deafening. Vanessa Brooks turned to Sharon and gave her a discreet nod of gratitude. This intervention wasn't simply a personal statement, it humanized Elijah in everyone's eyes, amplifying the emotional impact of the defense. Matthew Collins, usually unflappable, felt a new pressure. The boy's mother was no longer just a spectator, she was becoming a powerful voice against his lies. The jurors exchanged glances, visibly moved by Sharon's sincerity. Elijah felt a wave of warmth and comfort wash over him. For the first time, he felt supported not only by his lawyer, but by the unwavering strength of his family. Matthew's lie was beginning to crumble under the combined weight of the evidence, the testimonies, and now, his mother's palpable emotion. Judge Harris cleared his throat. "Very well, Ms. Carter. Thank you for your testimony. You may return to your seat." Sharon sat down, slightly breathless but with a light heart. Elijah, his eyes shining, felt that the battle was not yet over, but that each moment of truth exposed brought justice closer to him. The final hearing of the trial was in full swing. Closing arguments had just concluded, and Judge Harris announced that the jury would retire to deliberate. A heavy silence fell over the courtroom, thick with tension and anticipation. Elijah Carter remained seated in the dock, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. Every beat of his heart seemed to resonate throughout the courtroom. Beside him, his mother Sharon held his hand, offering silent and reassuring support. Vanessa Brooks reviewed her notes one last time, ready to intervene if necessary, but aware that the crucial moment now rested with the jury. Matthew Collins, sitting across from him, seemed nervous for the first time since the trial began. The contradictions in his testimony and the sheer volume of evidence against him were starting to take their toll. Even some of his colleagues in the courtroom were giving him worried looks, as if to remind him that his career might be at risk. The jury left the room, and the silence became almost unbearable. The murmurs of the audience died away, each person awaiting the verdict with palpable tension. Elijah closed his eyes for a moment, silently praying that justice would be served. Outside, local media cameras broadcast the wait, and Jefferson residents hung on the news, some hoping for a fair outcome, others fearing injustice. After what seemed like an eternity, the judge banged his gavel to announce the jury's return. Everyone in the room straightened, holding their breath. Elijah felt his hands grow clammy, his throat tighten, but he remained upright, ready to face the decisive moment. The head of the jury stood up and declared, "Your Honor, we have reached a verdict." Matthew Collins held his breath. The audience leaned forward. Elijah squeezed his mother's hand, ready to hear the truth that would change his life. Each second seemed to last an eternity. The lie had been exposed, the defense had shown, but the final verdict remained suspended on the tenuous thread of justice. The courtroom held its breath as the foreman stepped forward to deliver the verdict. Elijah Carter, his hands gripping his mother's, felt his heart pounding wildly. Each beat resonated in his temples, each breath seemed suspended in the air. "We, the jury," the foreman began, his voice deep and solemn, having examined all the evidence, heard the witnesses, and assessed the credibility of the parties, declare the defendant, Elijah Carter, not guilty. A stunned silence fell over the room, then erupted into murmurs and gasps of surprise. Sharon Carter burst into tears, clutching her son in her arms. Elijah, meanwhile, felt a mixture of disbelief and relief wash over him. He had been exonerated, the truth had prevailed. Matthew Collins froze, unable to react immediately. The entire courtroom seemed to be watching him with a mixture of reproach and astonishment. His career, his reputation, and his credibility had just crumbled under the weight of his lies. Even Judge Harris, impassive until now, let out a slight sign of disapproval. Vanessa Brooks turned to Elijah and smiled, satisfied. "You stood firm, Elijah. The truth prevailed." The young boy nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. For the first time since the beginning of this ordeal, he felt free. Every injustice, every fear, every moment of doubt had been overcome. Sharon, still emotional, murmured, "I am so proud of you, my son. You have shown the world what it means to stand tall, even in the face of fear and lies." Matthew Collins, for his part, had to face the consequences. His career as a police officer was seriously compromised, and the case would now be public knowledge, tarnishing his name forever. He had tried to convict an innocent young boy through arrogance and lies, and justice had uncovered the truth. As Elijah left the courtroom with his family and Vanessa by his side, he felt the weight of injustice lift. The truth had prevailed, and with it, the hope and dignity of those who had believed in it. The final shock was felt not only by the police officer, but by everyone who had believed his version of events. The courtroom would never forget the day the lie was exposed, and an innocent young man walked free, victorious, and dignified.